So today let's dissect OpenAI's blog on how they scaled Postgres to power 800 million ChatGPT users. Spoiler alert, they just have one Postgres primary instance and 50 read replicas. That's it. That's all it takes. Now, the blog has been recently published. I'll link it in the iCard above the video and below the description. You can find it there, or you're just a Google search away. You'll find typically the first link that would be covered, would have this blog. Now, they have been on Postgres like forever, and in last 1 year they grew 10x. And all they have is a single primary, multiple read replica, 50 read replicas to be precise. Now, how did they go about it? Of course, nobody starts with a horizontally scalable database. Nobody starts with that. Everybody starts simple and they figure out as they start hitting their scaling limitations. So when they saw their first initial surge of users, all they did was they optimized their application logic. Yes, they optimized the database layer, tuned a few parameters here and there. They scaled up the database instance vertically to handle more load and whatnot, and added more read replicas because they were read heavy workload. And even this setup was good enough to the stage. Now they're hitting their limitations and now they're planning to move, or they've moved some fragment of it to a sharded database, right? Which we'll discuss in some time. Now, when you have a very simple setup like this, what is a downside? So every API is just relying on this one database infra. The problem with that is any changes in upstream has a very catastrophic effect on your data layer. For example, because it's a read heavy, they would be heavily using caches. If there's a cache miss, because of cache miss, a lot of synchronous load will hit your database. Your database would start dying, for the lack of better word. Right? Second is some use cases would fire expensive multi-way joins, and that would saturate the CPU of your database nodes, and it would affect other requests with request timeouts and whatnot. Right? And let's say new feature is launched, everybody wants to try it. That's what happens, and that spike needs to be handled by the same infrastructure that you have. And this is a problem. This is legit a problem. So which is where, but vertically scaling has worked for them. You just need to be prepared for such events in general. Now, scaling reads is general a solved problem. You add more read replicas and it works fine. But what about writes? For a write heavy workload, for example, when you get a new feature release, everybody's trying it. So for short duration, you have a very high write workload. How do you deal with that? First of all, Postgres is not very efficient with write heavy workloads. Why? Because of their MVCC, which is multi-version concurrency control. To give you a gist, what it does is whenever you modify a column of a row or you modify the entire row, Postgres internally creates a second copy of the row. It does not do an in-place update. It creates a second copy of the row, because of which you now have write amplification, because every write leads Postgres to create a new row. Number one, problem. Second, if there are multiple updates on the same row, it would create those many versions of the rows. And then you need to have vacuuming, which is like a garbage collection, which cleans up the dead tuples. And this also leads to read amplification, because now when you're reading a row, it needs to go through all this version to figure out the latest version, or the version that is visible to the transaction. Hence, because of MVCC, which looks like a feature under a write heavy workload, again, reads are just fine. Under write heavy workload at scale can cause problems. So how do we solve it? Now, this is what OpenAI did. So they started migrating some of their shardable workloads. Again, there are some use cases which can easily be sharded. So they started identifying such micro pieces from their database and started moving it to a different sharded database. So they're heavily on Azure. So they are moving it to Cosmos DB, which is natively sharded database by Microsoft. Then the new workloads that are coming in, they are trying to forcefully fit it into a sharded database. The existing would still continue with Postgres. Some critical use case would still continue with this infra, but the newer one are by default being designed considering that they would be running on a sharded setup. Awesome. Now, in their existing setup of their Postgres that they have, how they have reduced their load on primary. So what they did is they found a few bugs which caused redundant writes onto a database. So they of course, fixed it. Easy peasy. Second is they started doing lazy writes. Now, lazy writes could be, again, the mantra for performance. Whatever does not need to be done in real time should not be done in real time. So they started writing it in a synchronous way so that they can do batch write to the database. Right? Third is they employed strict rate limits to the infrastructure so that you safeguard your database from a lot of incoming writes, which is fair. Right? On the query optimization side, they started avoiding a lot of complex multi-table joins. They literally had one query. This is what they mentioned in the blog. They had one query which joined 12 tables. Super expensive. You should try to avoid it. So the way they did it is they moved this logic, some of this logic to application layer. So you can replace join with multiple selects. That's what they did. And now because of multiple selects, they might come from read replica, they might come from your cache. This reduces the burden on your database. And more importantly, like always, like everybody does it at scale, review the queries generated by your ORMs. You cannot blindly trust the queries that your ORMs generate, because you have to take a look. They might not be using they might not have formulated the query in an efficient way. You have to rewrite it. For example, the famous n+1 query problem might hit, right? Or you might want to forcefully make your query use a particular index because the query planner is not using the appropriate index, right? So it's always better to audit and review the queries generated by ORM. That's what they also did. Next, they wanted to avoid SPOF, single point of failure, and how they did it. So they started moving the reads to read replica. Now this way, if the primary is down, then it's not a complete outage because the reads are still getting served. So it's a partial availability, not a complete outage. Again, writes are failing. Nobody's denying it, but it's not a complete outage. So read replica helped in improving availability of the system because reads are still working, which is good. And the read replicas are also pretty heavily scaled up. So they have enough headroom to handle a lot of scale, a lot of additional scale. Now on the primary side, now to have a high availability on primary, they have a hot standby. Hot standby is a replica which is not serving any active traffic. So write goes to primary, asynchronously replicates to this hot standby. If primary is down, hot standby takes its place. Dead simple. So they do an immediate failover. If the primary is down, hot standby immediately takes its place. If you want to try this out, you can just use a simple utility called keep alive D to implement this on local and just try it out how this works. Again, you can use, there are other ways to do it, but this is the easiest to get started with. Then they did workload isolation, noisy neighbor problem. You do not want two use cases hitting the same database, problem. So they started identifying which use case can go to which database, and they route those use cases to that corresponding read replica only, so that you do not have a noisy neighbor problem. Very easy. Again, it's more about you understanding your workload and then you try to fit things in rather than saying, hey, any request can go to any node. It's just about being aware of the kind of workload, the kind of use case, the kind of SLOs and SLAs you're going to provide to your customers. Right? Now, final few pieces. Connection pooling. Again, a very low hanging fruit. Postgres is an interesting database. By the way, every new connection that you create on Postgres is a new process. I have a separate video on it. I'll link it in the description in the iCard. Do watch it. So every time a new connection is set up to Postgres, it's a new process that is spun up. Hence, the problem is it's expensive. So your Postgres instance does not have large number of connections. It cannot handle large number of connections. And you can easily run out of connections on your existing setup because of your hardware limitations or your number of connections, especially at scale. And you might have a lot of idle connections. So hence, almost by default, whenever someone is having Postgres in their infra, you typically see a PG bouncer proxy in front of it. Almost always. So what is PG bouncer proxy? This is the place where every single of your client connects to, and PG bouncer does connection pooling to your database. So it makes sure that you efficiently reuse your connections. Second, it reduces the number of active connections to database. So for example, PG bouncer can handle, let's say 1000 connections, but it would just create 50 connections to your database. Whichever one is active, it would just reuse it from its queue. Right? So it reduces number of active connections. And more importantly, because it is reusing the connection, you don't have to re-establish the connection. So your connection setup latency reduces from 50 milliseconds to 5 milliseconds because you're literally reusing the connection rather than re-establishing the TCP connection. And then comes caching. Caching is, of course, it's a read heavy use case. So they have bunch of cache nodes and they try to make sure that their cache hit ratio is very high. But in case there is a cache miss, the load goes on Postgres, which they don't want. So what they do is something interesting. This is what CDNs also employ. I have a video, sorry to plug that, but I have a video on that as well, on how Jiffy uses CDN. So you can watch that. But the whole idea is simple. In case there is a cache miss, you do not want all of your requests to go to your database from all the nodes. So if one of the node is going and rehydrating the cache, others would just wait. So this way what happens is only one reader is going and rehydrating the cache, others are waiting on it. So this way this does not put a load on your origin, in this case Postgres. So this is what they called as cache locking. Some call this request hedging, multiple words for that. But cache locking is what they have mentioned in their blog. CDNs also use the same. When you get a lot of requests on your CDN does not, in case there's a cache miss, all of those requests don't go to origin. One of them goes to origin, others wait. When it gets the response, done, it returns back to the user, right? That's a way to do it. And the final one is scaling read replicas. This is an interesting one. Here we'll spend some more time on this. So they have one master, multiple. They have right now 50 read replicas, right? The problem with this is they cannot just keep adding more read replicas because the way replication works is not free. There is no free lunch. There is a trade-off. But like the way replication works in Postgres and in general any database. So you cannot just infinitely keep adding read replicas to your architecture. So the problem is, but if they would want to scale more, if they would want to handle more reads, what's their way out? There is no way out. There is a limitation to number of replicas that you would have. So what they are doing, this is still in testing as mentioned in their blog, they are having a cascading replication. So from primary, they will spin up intermediate replicas whose job would be to just replicate the stuff from primary, and from each one of these replica, they would fork off multiple read replicas. So this way, if let's say hypothetically, if a primary had a 50 read replica limit, what they would have is they would have like say 10 intermediate replica, and each of the 10 intermediate replica that you had, they might have 50 read replicas out of it. And then you would be able to scale and handle more reads eventually. Right? Again, as mentioned in their blog, this is still in testing. They have not rolled it out, but it's an interesting way to solve your high read problem on your existing architecture rather than trying to doing something fancy. Cascading replication. This is something which is also very common. Multi-tier read replicas are very common at scale, and they will try this out. And yeah, this is the quick gist of their blog. It's pretty short blog, and hence the dissection is also pretty short. But you see the kind of nuances, like very low-hanging fruits being plugged and helping them handle 800 million users on ChatGPT. Fascinating blog, right? Again, I've linked the blog in the description and in the iCard. Please go ahead and read it. It's pretty straightforward and it's fun. You can try out the HA thing that I mentioned on Postgres. Try that out locally. Use LLM to generate code. Use ChatGPT, make it generate the code for Keep Alive D, doing failover of Postgres master. It hardly takes 15 minutes to do it, but do it. It's fun, right? And yes, this is all what I wanted to cover in this one. I hope you found it interesting. Hope you found it amusing. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a ton.